Hi, my name is John Sewell. I'm doing this video as part of a educational neuroscience course, and also because I'm quite passionate about getting better results from students and better understanding of how students learn by teachers. Um, I'm actually coming to the end of my 50th year of teaching in 2 weeks' time. To put that in context, I expect in 10 years' time to be sitting down and saying to an audience, I'm about to come to the end of my 60th year of teaching. In looking at this, I'm going to look at 3 aspects: why education neuroscience, how do we implement it, and when. To the why of valuing educational neuroscience, it's very easy for poor teachers to just accept students' results, thinking that there is not a lot they can do to bring about improvements. It's difficult for many teachers to not have fixed ideas about students' intelligence, thinking certain students can and certain students can't learn. My anecdotal observation is that many teachers with those fixed mindsets work with students based upon those mindsets, not based on what the student is capable of doing. They will often write in comments, working to his or her potential, not really having any idea of what that potential is. With this respect, my goal is to help facilitate that change. First step is to understand how the brain works and develops. This is a sketch of the basics of the brain, showing the various lobes. Of particular interest to teachers is the frontal lobe. Part of the frontal lobe is the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for self-control, planning, and self-awareness. It's understood that that undergoes a large amount of development through the teenage years. The problem is that only one part of the teenage brain is really very developed. It's almost fully developed, and it's the limbic system. The limbic system, deep in the center of the brain, is the brain's reward center, fully developed, as I've mentioned, in teenage years. And the particular parts I'm going to be interested in are the amygdala and the hippocampus. Deep within the brain, the amygdala direct communication between the lower brain and the upper brain. The lower brain is more primitive and controls things such as breathing and digestion, as well as reactions that are largely involuntary, such as the fight-flight response. The upper brain, or prefrontal cortex, is where memory is constructed, and it is more reflective and involved with voluntary behavior rather than reactive things. According to Blakemore, indicators are that the limbic system changes only modestly during adolescence. It's largely fully developed, while the prefrontal cortex experiences a dramatic shift in volume, often largely due to pruning of old synaptic connections. The upshot, brain scans seem to indicate that the limbic system, the reward system, is maturing and really firing, while the prefrontal cortex, which is involved with things such as self-control, planning, and self-awareness, is still developing. There is a mismatch between those two systems. The limbic system gives rewarding feelings and encourages teenagers to take risks, and is structurally much more developed than the prefrontal cortex, which actually stops them from taking those risks. When we learn, we change the way our brain cells and neurons interact with each other. There is a strengthening of the myelin sheath shown in this diagram, and that changes the way the nerve cells interact. When we learn, our brains grow. That is, when learning occurs, neurons are strengthened, new neural pathways are built, and networks of interrelated pathways are connected. In other words, structural changes occur in the brain. That's for anyone who's learning, not just students, teachers as well. Unfortunately, learning can fail to occur, particularly when the student is under stress And what happens is that the lower brain responses occur, which is not with thinking of the student. A more fundamental explanation for non-productive student behaviour is rooted in the brain design, which is really designed for survival. And students under stress will go into survival mode rather than learning. In that survival mode, their brain is full of stress hormones and learning really cannot occur. We induce the amygdala into action and we get the fight-flight response when there's a stressful situation in the classroom. Here is a list of things, just some things that can induce that stress and cause students not to learn. However, the important bit is that the brain is well and truly ready to learn. The hippocampus, which I mentioned earlier, from the Greek for seahorse, because it's in the shape of a seahorse, sort of. It relays information and stores into long-term memory on three bases: urgency, repetition, or association. Urgency relates to survival. I had an experience just a couple of weeks ago where I accidentally picked up a brown snake, caught up in some netting. Look, I haven't had to get that into my long-term memory. It's there. It's important for survival. I remember the incident entirely. I don't remember everything I'm learning in this particular course, but I do remember about that brown snake. Far more often, though, in learning in education is repetition. We create memories by repetition and by making meaning. The other way of learning is by association. That is, attaching new ideas to old memories. As long as those old memories are right and not incorrect presuppositions, then we can attach new memories to those old memories, and they'll be learned far more effectively. So association is a good way of learning. One of the ways that students learn is by repetition. The thing about repetition is that it increases connections between neurons, and that drives memory. And from that repeated activation of those networks, the memory is strengthened. The trouble is with teachers with fixed mindsets about students, they may not take the time to repeat things if they don't believe that a student can learn. One of the methods that I use for student learning is chunking, and I've used that for a long time, and I've done some research on it. Here's a pretty simple example of chunking about long-term memory. If we code that into our long-term memory, we could write it out several times. We visualize it. We can do a number of things with it in order to get that firmly entrenched into our long-term memory. Once it's there, it's probably all there, not just part of it, but all of it. When we learn, neurons change. The white matter of the brain particularly increases as the myelin sheaths are reinforced every single time we learn something new. That increases the speed of responses and also increases the network, which involves any particular memory. So when we learn, our brain changes. This is a great reminder for students that they ought to complete learning tasks so that their brains grow. One of the main reasons that students fail to learn is classroom climate. If it's a classroom where students are anxious, then they won't learn, or where they fear being wrong, where they fear taking tests. The teacher needs to design it so that reduces any sort of stress on students. So it's important to reduce the stress and make learning pleasurable for students. When that happens, they get a dopamine hit, pleasure hormone hit, and that means they will want to repeat that behaviour. So we can develop good repetitive behaviours by making learning pleasurable. It is great to know that our brains continue to develop throughout our lives and we continue to make new neuronal connections. It's even more encouraging to know that we can control that to some degree by engaging in healthy behaviour and serious mental activity. Unfortunately, the pendulum can swing the other way, and bad behaviours and minimal mental activity can actually result in fewer cells and even loss of neural connections. So I've certainly tried for a lot of years, 25, 30, to bring about changes in classrooms where teachers have a belief that all students can learn. I think the change has to be a quantum leap, not just gradual changes. My personal view is now is a great time to start in any school. I'm thinking of my school at the moment. And just a few points. I think there needs to be a high status coordinator with appropriate qualifications, including in educational neuroscience. Schools are appointing teaching learning coordinators, and I think that's a major step. We need to begin the process not with the students but with the staff, making teachers very aware of their own personal fixed mindsets about students. I think we need regular professional development. I hate meetings. However, I think regular professional development in the school, right where the workplace is really important. We often go away for professional development and come back with nothing. But if we do it in the school, on a day by day, week by week, month by month basis, then I think we can make some headway. I think we need an ongoing implementation and review of pedagogical programs to improve student outcomes, always asking what can we do to improve these outcomes, and regular use of data from formative assessment to change and develop, so that it is data driven, not just based upon assumptions. So thank you for listening. I hope this has answered the question of why we should incorporate educational neuroscience into our school settings.